Philip, so why is gridX participating in 𝙜𝙤𝙚𝙬𝙚?
Kevin, quite happy to explain a bit upon it. For us, from our perspective, the Smart DE and especially the 𝙜𝙤𝙚 is the only trade fair that really has a cross-country and cross-sector approach, right? What I mean with that is, by cross-sector, all the exhibitors from the PV scope are there, storage batteries, heating, but also EVCS, so from the e-mobility part, they are all exhibiting there. They are coming from across the globe from a supplier perspective. So there are Asian OEMs exhibiting, European wholesalers, European craftsmen. They are all walking across the trade fair area, right, and checking out the trade booths. And it's also from a cross-European focus, right? That's what I meant by a cross-country focus. So it's not only having a focus on the German energy market, but all the exhibitors, they are coming here to have a European focus. So it's not specifically about super German-specific regulatory aspects. They are also being addressed, but really has a unique European focus. So it's not like a UK-based trade fair only focusing on the UK globe, but it's really having a cross-sector and cross-European focus, which is just ideally aligning with our gridX focus as well, right? Because we are a German company, we have been founded and grew in Germany, but we also have a quite European focus by now. And we also integrate with all the different asset types, so PV, storage, battery, EVCS, heat pumps. So this cross-sector and cross-country scope just perfectly aligns with our strategy as well.
Now, what can folks expect to see from you there this year?
Yeah. As I just explained, all those different stakeholders, they are quite active in the energy market for quite some while, right? So you have especially OEMs from more Asian-oriented production sites, right? So especially a lot of Chinese OEMs in the PV inverter, but also household storage battery OEM segment. You have a lot of EVCS companies across Europe, but also Asian ones are growing, right? And they are selling through European wholesalers to the craftsmen who then install the assets at the end customer side, right? And all of them, they are present there, they have their own booths, and they thrived in 2022 and 2023 by just selling hardware as a hardware commodity, right? So they just focus on selling hardware, and then the end customer or the installer needs to install the hardware. But things got a bit more complicated in the European energy market right now. We have a lot of regulation upcoming because there's just so high amounts of PV being installed. So all the PV panels, they put the grid at a certain stress level, right? So grid operators demand a certain control level for PV assets for the feed-in, but also for the offtake. So for the offtake of EVCS, so of EV chargers or of heat pumps, they want to be in charge when it comes to certain critical times, when it comes to grid stability. And these are mandatory legislations being implemented. Germany is probably the most active one right now, being heavily complicated in terms of regulation, but all the other European markets, they also follow suit, and first ones already do, which puts especially Chinese OEMs in a position where they need to be an expert in something they are or they haven't been an expert in, right? They just produced hardware. They excelled in producing really good, high qualitative hardware at a cheap price, which is why they also assumed huge shares in the European market. And the wholesalers are especially good at procuring hardware and then reselling it to craftsmen and training the craftsmen here in Europe. So the end customer installers, so to say. But each of them needs to comply with these kind of regulations now with advanced use cases like time of use optimizations, optimizing on the spot price electricity mark. This is being requested or even mandatory by end customers or from a regulated perspective. And this is super important. And this is the first time ever that these kind of Asian OEMs and wholesalers are really interested in these kind of use cases. So this brings us there. We will present quite a couple of interesting updates from our ecosystem. And that's something we are really looking forward to for the Smart Year.
Now, if I may ask, obviously you have some new stuff coming down the line, but in terms of that ecosystem build out, anything you can share with us before the event?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can make a quite concrete and practical example. Just imagine you are a German house owner, right? So you have a German house and you want to have a PV system with a house, a battery with an EV charger and heat pump being installed. You ask your installer who's living just on the same street, a small craftsman, to install the assets. She procures it then from a wholesaler, and the wholesaler in the first, they procured it from Asia, from Europe, from the US, whatever, where the OEM or the hardware manufacturer is in producing. This is how it used to be, but by now, especially in Germany, it gets really complicated because you also need to install a smart meter. The smart meter has been a huge pain point in Germany. We still have a quite low penetration rate of smart meters. And smart meters are either installed by the big utilities, but they are not the fastest, or they are now also startup scale-ups who are focusing on installing smart meters, and they are the so-called competitive smart meter installers, to translate it into English. And then on a third step, you as an end customer, you also want to change your electricity tariff, right? Because you probably still have an old static electricity tariff, but you want to have a fully optimized dynamic tariff, and which you can then also use to charge your EV when the price is cheapest, right? So you as an end customer, you would be in a position where you need to inform yourself about all the different options you have, right? So who's the installer who should install it? Which hardware should I choose? Who shall install the smart meter at your home? And which electricity tariff do you want to sign up? And in the end, you also need some kind of smart home energy management system, which optimizes all the different assets, right? So you would really need to drill through the entire internet. You would need to inform yourself, which is not trivial, and your regional installer will probably not be able to answer all those advanced questions just as of now, right? So gridX is right now forming really strategic cooperations with the leading Asian OEMs, with the leading wholesalers, with the leading smart meter installers, with the leading electricity companies, who all have a focus not only in Germany, but really across Europe, to have a fully compatible and fully product ready or product bundle, which then the end customer can procure from an installer, and the installer also needs to be trained. But these are really deep strategic cooperations. A couple of them we will also be announcing already at the Smart 𝙜𝙤. So I think you can stay tuned, and there are a couple of things we want to highlight there.
And what do you mean by ready for gridX?
Ready for gridX is our cooperation scheme with OEMs, right? So it was founded by gridX, or we introduced it because we saw the high need that also, especially Asian OEMs, but also European ones, who focused on bringing their hardware to the European energy market. And we really need to enable them to also cope with the requirements of the changing energy market landscape in Europe, right? So it used to be the case that you could fully focus on an as easy as possible installation process for the hardware. It should be as cheap, but still as qualitative as possible. But that's not sufficient to cover with the changing needs anymore, because as also mentioned, there are obligatory legislations where the grid operator needs to be able to control the PV inverter for the feed-in capacity, for instance, or need to be able to control the EVCS, how much the offtake from the grid is, or even the heat pump, to be certain that the grid is always at a certain stability. Grid operators also demand to control these assets at the end customer side, right? But this is not something for which these assets were originally designed for. And it's a truly European specific scheme, right? And all those use cases, they are not harmonized across Europe, and every European country is then also different, right? So you have German specifics, you have UK specifics, you have Italian specifics, but then you also have Asian OEMs or US-based OEMs, whatever, and they see Europe just as one of their hardware markets where they sell commodity hardware as a commodity, right? So they cannot focus specifically with their product design on Europe, and especially not at individual European countries, right? And this is where we come in. We support the OEMs to really cope with the specifics of the European energy market. We support them in having one standardized interface towards our EMS, so towards our home energy management system, or what we optimize with charge point operators for high power charging hubs. And then we truly support the OEMs in setting up their interface, having an as smooth as possible commissioning process with us, to having a super proven end customer support scheme, in order to scale their hardware with gridX through all the different European energy markets, right? And then the OEM can prosper because they can continue selling across all the European markets, and they have a true USP because they are fully compatible plug-and-play commissioning, but can also optimize on all the different use cases in all the different European countries. And we from gridX, we are obviously also happy because we can attach our grid box to all the inverters out of China, out of Europe, out of the US. So the end customer is happy because the end customer setup is fully integrated. The OEM is happy because they can continue to what they do. They can sell hardware and they can focus on producing and selling hardware. And gridX is also focusing on what we excel at, which is then the energy market optimization.
So what will make the event successful from your point of view?
Mm, As I already highlighted, we are really keen to showcase on what kind of strategic partnerships we are working, right, from our ecosystem. So we will also co-exhibit at the booths of a couple of our ecosystem partners. So it's not only, we do not only have presence at our own gridX booth, but really also at the booths of leading Asian OEMs, at a couple of wholesalers we'll talk with. So this will will for us be super important to also showcase these strategic partnerships, because really a first time ever that some of those Asian OEMs really open up for such in-depth European partnerships. So that's truly unique, and I think a couple of people will also be quite surprised about these new strategic partnerships. So happy to be there and showcase this. But then also, I mean, it's always good to meet the people in person, right? So even if you had 100 calls online over the past couple of weeks, it's always good to see the people in person, shake hands, give them a hug because you meet them once again after 1 year. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. And in the end, we will also announce a couple of interesting product updates from our side as well, right? So really how the installation process is even smoother for the end customer, how it's a plug and play commissioning with the leading inverter brands, new optimization schemes in terms of time of use, but also the first flexibility use cases. So a couple of interesting use cases we want to show, but also these strategic partnerships. So I would say it's a successful event if we talk to our ecosystem partners with whom we are in touch anyway, but we can also convince a couple of new ones and also answer questions from the broader energy market because they are intrigued by those kind of partnerships and they also are keen to join our ecosystem then to explain them what it's all about, because in the end we can prosper only at gridX if the OEMs prosper, if the end customer prospers, if the end customer has a truly convenient and saving energy system. That's all the same goal we are all working towards. So it's not about competition towards other EMS companies. It's not about competition with OEMs who used to have their own smart energy management, but it's really about cooperation between former competitors, because we all have the same aim, right? We want to drive fossil fuels out of the energy market. We all have the same competitor, which is the big oil companies. It's not between competition between inverter brands or EMS brands. So for me, it would be truly successful if we can all cease to think about ourselves as competitors and think about how we can jointly drive the smart energy market forward.
Hey, good stuff. Well, I wish you a very successful event.
Thank you, Kevin.